What if we as a nation came to realize that the quest for empire eventually destroys all great nations?
Welcome to the morning show, and as promised, this is something I've been looking very, very much forward to. I'm a huge fan, Dr. Ron Paul, and a man who really, truly needs no introduction, but I will bother just lightly. You may have heard his name. You know his son, Rand Paul, served as a U.S. representative for countless years, and an advocate for, if I can sum it up, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, an advocate for liberty, which is a word that people seem to be overlooking these days and not paying a whole lot of attention to. But with all the news these days, we have plenty to talk about. And one of the components of liberty is one of the reasons you're going to be coming to town, Homeschool Convention coming to town. And you're going to be a keynote speaker there. Tell me how homeschooling relates so much to the concept of liberty in this country.
Well, I'm glad you picked up on that word because it's pretty important. One of my organizations, Campaign for Liberty, I feel like that's what I've been involved in for many, many decades, actually. But no, there is definitely a connection. I talk a lot about liberty and why it should bring people together, because even if people use their liberties differently, and certainly in our religious beliefs that is the case, education is the same way. We don't all have to be educated the same way. As a matter of fact, I don't even like the idea, because usually if there's only one way, it usually is the government that does it.
Yes.
In my lifetime, it's going from the local level to the state level to the federal level and even to the international level through the UN. They want to have universal control education. So I am particularly interested in homeschooling because I see it as really an alternative to what we're going through right now, and also an opportunity to understand the principles of liberty, the principles of the Constitution, which I think have been severely neglected.
Well, and as the Cincinnati Homeschool Convention will prove to everyone, the materials, the resources, it's all there, and it's available for people who choose to take this path. And it's not an easy one. I've talked to a number of people who've homeschooled their children, and they'll be the first people to tell you, listen, it is a different life, but it's a life that we've chosen because we believe it is a better path, a more efficient path. And again, you go back to one size doesn't fit all. I wrote the word Einstein down as you said that because it's one of the classic examples of somebody who did miserably in a structured traditional school, yet turned out to be one of the world's most brilliant human beings. This flexibility that homeschool allows, it bothers me that it may even be under threat.
Yes, and I think the flexibility is the big issue, because every parent might not want to do it. They might want to do it differently. They might want to get help. But the important principle is the competition, and that's what those in the public school system and some of the proponents of big government, that they don't want the competition. So I think this is an important alternative. It will always be under threat. Actually, I remember very clearly being involved in some of the fights that went on in the early 1980s, because that was when it was becoming more popular, but there was a vicious attack, but a few good court cases helped us get through that. But I tell people they better remain vigilant. This might be the real alternative to the promotion of big government, and when that happens, when push comes to shove, they try to close down the opposition. So right now it's in many ways thriving, but in other ways, there's still a lot of restrictions. Report to the state. Tell them what they're doing. Where are your kids? Who really owns your kids? Is it the parents or is it the state? You know, that challenge is going to continue.
It is, and I like talking about this simply because even if you aren't interested in actually engaging the process of homeschooling, you need to be engaged in your child's education in some way, even if, as I put it, to deprogram your kids when they come home. My children went through public schools. My son is a freshman at Ohio State. He's doing quite well. I'm extraordinarily proud of both of my children. But when you hear what they come home with and you read the materials that they've been provided, it takes an engaged parent to stay up on that and talk about why they may be getting the wrong information or somehow why that may be skewed. And that's it. To me, that's an element of homeschooling.
That is, and that's been one of the big problems about why we have a certain type of government, because the conditioning starts early on, and now it's even preschool. They condition individuals to have certain attitudes about watching their parents, and what about environmental problems, and it causes dissension. I think that if we don't have a healthy alternative, which to me is private and homeschooling, our conditions will get much worse. But I think there's some positive things going on, although there will always be threats. I think the positive things are that the for the homeschooling is the need for it, because people are starting to realize the educational system is deeply flawed. It's costing us a lot of money. Did you ever look at your school taxes?
Add that to a college tuition, Dr. Paul.
Yeah. So the costs are going up, the quality's going down. And what about the violence? Some parents, right now are getting very frightened about all the stories and the violence in school and the bullying that goes on. So I think, and to me, the ultimate responsibility is on the parents. That's who should be responsible for the children, not the government.
Well, at 47, I'm closer in age to your son, Rand, and I've talked to him many times. And I since you talk about violence and you mentioned some of the deterioration in schools and some of the reasons parents might be concerned, I got to go back to what I recognize, and correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the fundamental problem here, and the reason that teachers are having such a difficult time, even in a public school, even if you and I might differ about the curriculum that's being taught there, you can't teach children who have no structure or love or guidance at home. They are an unruly mob. They aren't there to be educated. There are bad influences around them. And if there aren't parents there to, like my parents, get them in shape, insist that they move and achieve to their ability, then there's really no hope there.
No, and I think that's a good point, because there are members of my family that teach and have taught in public schools for a long time, well motivated. And there's plenty of teachers. I'm sure there are more motivated teachers than non-motivated teachers, but there's a limit to what they can do when the family structure is gone, and that is probably the basic flaw that we have in the system. I tend to think laws and conditions are a reflection of morality rather than the laws being changed and causes the changes in morality. I think it starts with the breakdown of the home and the individual.
Indeed. I pray every day that if you bring a child into this world, at least do society the favor of taking care of your responsibility and getting them to the point in their life where they can take care of themselves. There seems to be something lost on that these days.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Let me ask you something. I have read, the burial, if you will, of the Republican Party in the aftermath of the November election. I personally still believe I'm cut from the mold of maybe a Goldwater-esque Republican. I consider myself a libertarian. I refer to myself as a libertarian all the time. And my thought and my theory is that the salvation of the Republican Party will be a shift toward a more libertarian mentality. It is a more all-encompassing freedom, Jeffersonian liberty concept that I think, again, going back to liberty, it's kind of been lost. We have crony capitalist on the right. We certainly have the what I would argue fascist on the left. Libertarian philosophy seems to me offer something that is truly, genuinely American. Do you see the Republican Party waking up to that, or what do you see?
I see them resisting it.
Yeah, I know John McCain, yes.
Yeah, because, if you really understand the concepts of liberty in our Constitution, what we should be looking at is non-intervention. I use that word a lot because, the words are distorted. Libertarian can get a bad rap.
Right.
Liberal used to be a good word. Why should being progressive be bad, but now progressives are the worst people as far as the conservatives are concerned?
Well, it's Orwellian newspeak, Dr. Paul. You know that. They change the words in order to keep people on their toes.
That's why I like non-intervention, which means that I, as a government official, I don't want to intervene in your personal life and your lifestyle as long as you don't hurt people.
Right.
And you're responsible for your own acts. But I don't want to intervene in your economic life. So too often we've split this in two pieces. Some people defend, rather well the economic freedoms, but not the personal liberties, and vice versa. And I think liberty is a unit, and we should define the individual right. That takes you back to the basics of where our rights come from, and I believe they come from a creator. And we all should have equal justice under the law. But we shouldn't divide this up and be in a big contest between who's going to have the most freedom, those in social liberties or economic liberties. It should all be one thing. But that's where I don't think the Republicans have really grasped that, because because they tend to sort of push low taxes pretty well, but boy, they love intervention overseas.
Oh, yes.
And I think the founders are very clear, when they talked about no entangling alliances, don't get involved in internal affairs of other nations. Just think of what we're doing today, and we're bankrupting ourselves.
Oh.
And believe me, we have a lot of enemies out there. And when we have an economic crisis bigger than 08, 09, that crisis is going to be a real threat to us because right now we're still king of the hill. But that doesn't mean that we're going to stay that way, the way we're abusing our monetary system and our budget.
Without question, and I guess you may have seen the other day, Australia has gone off the U.S. currency as its reserve, and they're now trading directly with Chinese currency. And, of course, the Chinese are very, very much interested in the Australian mines. So we can be done without, and the world can move around us if they choose to, and that concerns me, especially given the situation in the Middle East, which seems to be unfolding. I mean, I'm not quite certain where this is going, but with Korea kind of coming unglued with their new leader, you have Syria falling apart. Of course, Israel has got pressure from all sides, and Iran and Iraq and the ongoing situation there. I'm not quite certain. We certainly ourselves cannot manage that entire affair, and I'm just curious at what point we decide we're not going to continue to be the world's police department.
Not until we're broke. I mean, that's when the Soviets finally quit. But I tell people, they said, even if you don't agree with me about bringing our troops home and more sensibly, I said, I'm going to win the argument because we're going to run out of money. That's why the Soviets gave up on their empire. They had to.
They
did. System failed. So ours will eventually fail, and ours really is not solvent. It works only because the people of the world still see us as an economic and a military power. But once that confidence is lost in us, there's no reason for them to have confidence in our dollar.
All right, and before we leave, with that bleak sort of reality, and because it is a bleak situation, we are recklessly overspending ourselves into oblivion. Zimbabwean economy, Weimar Republic, how many times we have to spill this out? Where do you see us as Americans coming out the other side, assuming this financial calamity ultimately does occur?
Well, that's where I can, become more optimistic. I think on the short run, I don't think there's going to be a turnaround. We're not going to all of a sudden have the majority vote in Congress and the people will accept, a more frugal government because right now everybody's out there with their hands out, grabbing. Can I get a piece of the pie before the pie's gone?
Yeah.
So the collapse will come, but I see a real healthy change going on. I go to the universities. I talk to a lot of young people. They're thinking more seriously about sound economic policies. They don't like the wars going on. The monetary system makes no sense to them. And I think we're far better off than the Russians ever were and the Eastern Bloc nations because their histories weren't as good. We have a good history, and we don't have to invent anything new. We have to pick up where we left off and emphasize this whole thing that we started off this conversation, and emphasize the importance of personal liberty. And I think we can restore the whole system and actually become healthier. But we have a ways to go. But from what I see and hear from the young people on college campuses, I remain an optimist.
Thank God for that. You've always been an inspiration for me. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today. Glad to have you in town for the homeschool convention. I'm glad to see you're advocating on behalf of not just that, but liberty generally. Continue the hard work. I know you're retiring. We're going to miss you having you in Congress as a voice of reason, if not the only voice of reason, but certainly you're going to continue to be engaged and continue to be a great influence in politics in America, sir.
Okay, wonderful. Nice talking to you.
Great talking to you, Doctor.